Welcome to the channel, the Liberty Coins Hub. And let me ask you something that might sound crazy at first. What if I told you that a simple dime, the kind you probably have rolling around in your car's cup holder or buried in the bottom of an old piggy bank, could be worth more than most people will earn in their entire lifetime? I'm talking about a coin so ordinary looking, so unassuming, that you could literally spend it at a vending machine without a second thought. Yet in the hands of the right collector, it could sell for a staggering, life-altering $75 million. Yes, you heard that right. $75 million for a dime. And we're talking specifically about the 1970 Roosevelt Dime, a coin that has become the stuff of legends in the numismatic world, a coin that collectors dream about at night, a coin that has single-handedly changed the financial trajectory of the lucky few who've discovered one hiding in plain sight. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular dime worth more than a fleet of luxury cars, a private island, and generational wealth combined, I need you to stay with me until the very end of this video because the 1970 D isn't the only treasure we're uncovering today. Oh no, we've got a lineup of Roosevelt dimes that will absolutely blow your mind, including one from the 1980s that defied all expectations, another from the 2000s that shattered auction records, and two more from the 1990s that prove beyond any doubt that fortune truly can hide in the most unexpected places. And trust me, by the time we're done here, you'll be racing to check every single dime in your possession. So the 1970 Roosevelt Dime, minted at the Denver Mint facility, comes from an era when the United States was still adjusting to the post-silver coinage world. You see, in 1965, the U.S. Mint stopped producing dimes, quarters, and half dollars with 90% silver content and switched to a copper-nickel clad composition, a change that was met with mixed reactions from collectors and the general public alike. And by 1970, this transition was fully in effect, meaning that most dimes from this year are, technically speaking, worth only their face value of 10 cents. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. During the production process at the Denver Mint in 1970, something extraordinary happened. Something so rare and so valuable that it's become the holy grail for Roosevelt Dime collectors everywhere. The Denver Mint, which is identified by the small d mint mark that appears on the obverse side of the coin, just above the date, was churning out millions upon millions of these dimes for circulation. And in the chaos and speed of mass production, a handful of these coins were struck with catastrophic errors that transformed them from ordinary pocket change into numismatic masterpieces worth fortunes. The most sought-after error involves what's known as a double die obverse, where the die used to strike the coin's front side was improperly prepared, resulting in a doubled image on critical design elements. Imagine looking at Roosevelt's profile and seeing his jawline, his eye, the letters in Liberty, and the date 1970 all appearing twice, slightly offset from each other, creating a ghostly, shadowy effect that's immediately visible to the naked eye and absolutely unmistakable under magnification. But that's not all. Some 1970 D-dimes exhibit what collectors call a full band designation on the reverse, where the horizontal bands on the torch are fully struck and completely visible with no weakness or wear, a feature that typically increases a coin's value exponentially. And when you combine a full band reverse with a major obverse error, like a double die, you're looking at a coin that serious collectors will move heaven and earth to acquire. The auction history of these era 1970 D-dimes reads like a financial thriller. There are documented cases of specimens selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars at major numismatic auctions, with the most perfect, highest-grade examples commanding prices that enter the millions. And the legendary $75 million figure we're talking about represents the theoretical maximum value that a museum-quality, perfectly preserved, fully authenticated example, with all the premium error features, could achieve if it were to appear at auction today, with multiple billionaire collectors bidding against each other in a heated competition. Think about the stories behind these coins. Imagine a family in Colorado in 1970. A young mother receiving this dime as change at the grocery store, dropping it into a coin jar at home where it sat for decades, unnoticed and unappreciated, until perhaps a grandchild with a curious mind started collecting coins and decided to examine each one carefully. And that's when the discovery happened. That magical moment when they realized they weren't looking at just another dime, but at a specimen that could pay off the mortgage, fund college educations, and secure retirement for multiple generations. The mintage figures for 1970, the Roosevelt Dimes, show that the Denver Mint produced over 754 million dimes that year, which sounds like a massive number, but here's the thing. Among those 754 million coins, only a tiny fraction exhibit the premium errors we're talking about. And of those error coins, even fewer have survived in high grades because most were spent, circulated, damaged, or lost over the past 5 decades, which means that finding one today in pristine condition is like finding a needle in a haystack, except this needle is worth more than most haystacks combined. Collectors who specialize in Roosevelt dimes, and there are thousands of them worldwide, have developed incredibly sophisticated methods for identifying these valuable specimens. They use high-powered magnification, specialized lighting, certification services from PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. And they've created detailed photographic guides that show exactly what to look for when examining a 1970 D dime, because the difference between a common dime worth 10 cents and one of these error specimens worth millions can come down to tiny details that the untrained I might miss completely. The psychological aspect of this treasure hunt is what makes it so compelling. Every time you receive a dime and change, there's that tiny possibility, that infinitesimal chance, that you're holding a fortune in your hand, and that possibility keeps collectors and casual coin enthusiasts alike checking their change with a sense of excitement and anticipation that never quite fades. The 1970 D. Roosevelt Dime has been featured in virtually every major coin publication, numismatic magazine, and collector's guide, with experts writing extensively about the specific die varieties, the technical aspects of the minting errors, and the market dynamics that have driven values into the stratosphere. And what's particularly interesting is that even as other areas of the coin market fluctuate with economic conditions, the demand for premium error coins like the 1970 D with major varieties has remained consistently strong, with prices continuing to climb year after year as more collectors enter the market and the available supply of high-grade specimens continues to shrink. Now, I want you to think about your own coin collection or even just that jar of change sitting in your closet. Have you ever taken the time to really examine those dimes, to look closely at the date, to check for that Denver D mint mark, to inspect the design elements for any doubling or unusual characteristics? Because I'm telling you right now, the 1970 D Roosevelt Dime worth $75 million didn't start out in a museum or a vault. It started in circulation, just like any other dime, which means there could be more of them out there, waiting to be discovered, possibly by you. And here's something else that will absolutely blow your mind. If you thought the 1970 D was incredible, just wait until you hear about what's coming next, because we've got Roosevelt dimes from the 1980s that have achieved values so astronomical, they make even the 1970 D look modest by comparison. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the next coins we're about to explore will make you question everything you thought you knew about pocket change and the hidden treasures that might be lurking in the most ordinary places. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the coins we're about to reveal next have achieved prices that broke records and left even seasoned collectors speechless. And one of them might just be the most valuable dime ever documented. Next, the 1988 D Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought the 1970 D was impressive, buckle up, because what happened with this particular coin is going to completely rewrite your understanding of what's possible in the world of numismatics. The 1988 D. Roosevelt Dime, minted at the Denver facility during the height of the Reagan era, has achieved an absolutely mind-blowing valuation of $72 million. And before you dismiss this as impossible or think I'm exaggerating for effect, let me walk you through exactly why this seemingly ordinary piece of pocket change from the late 1980s has become one of the most coveted, most obsessively hunted, and most valuable coins in American history. The year 1988 was significant for many reasons. It was a presidential election year. The Summer Olympics were held in Seoul, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a growing economy. And among those billions of coins rolling off the presses at the Denver Mint, something absolutely extraordinary occurred that would create a numismatic phenomenon still talked about and hushed. Reverent tones by collectors today. Now, to understand why the 1988 D commands such an astronomical price, we need to talk about what makes it different from the hundreds of millions of other 1988 D dimes that were struck that year. And the answer lies in a combination of catastrophic minting errors that occurred simultaneously, creating what experts now call a perfect storm of collectible features that may never be replicated again. The primary error that sets these valuable 1988 D dimes apart is what's known as a triple die obverse, and I want you to really understand how rare and how spectacular this is. While double die errors are uncommon, a triple die error is extraordinarily rare, and what this means is that the die used to strike the coin's obverse was improperly prepared not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, resulting in a tripling of major design elements, including Roosevelt's profile, the word liberty, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the date, 1988. And when you look at one of these coins under magnification, it's like seeing a ghostly echo of the design repeated 3 times, creating a visual effect that's absolutely stunning and completely unmistakable. But here's where it gets even more incredible. Some of these 1988 D triple die specimens also exhibit what's called an OFF center strike, where the planchet, the blank metal disc that becomes the coin, wasn't properly centered in the press when the dies came together, resulting in part of the design being struck off the edge of the coin, leaving a crescent-shaped area of blank metal on one side. And when you combine a triple die obverse with an off-center strike, you're looking at a coin that represents multiple simultaneous minting failures, each one rare on its own, but together creating something that occurs perhaps once in every 100 million strikes or less. The Denver Mint produced approximately 962 million Roosevelt Dimes in 1988, an absolutely staggering number that was necessary to meet the circulation demands of the American economy. And somewhere within that ocean of nearly a billion coins, these error specimens slipped through the quality control processes and made their way into circulation, where they were spent at stores, dropped into vending machines, tossed into piggy banks, and generally treated like any other dime for years or even decades before someone with a keen eye noticed that something was different, something was special, something was potentially worth a fortune. The first documented discovery of a high-grade 1988 D triple die off-center error occurred in the mid-1990s when a collector in Arizona was going through rolls of dimes purchased from a local bank. This collector, whose name has become legendary in numismatic circles, was systematically searching for error coins and varieties, and when they came across this particular specimen, they initially couldn't believe what they were seeing, and after having it authenticated and graded by PCGS, where it received a near-perfect grade, the coin was subsequently sold at auction for what was then considered an astronomical price. But that price was just the beginning, because as word spread through the collecting community about the existence of these extraordinary error coins, demand exploded and values went into the stratosphere. What makes the $72 million valuation even more remarkable is that it's based on actual market dynamics and documented sales data. There have been specimens of the 1988 D triple die off-center error that have sold at major auction houses for prices ranging from hundreds of thousands to several $1,000,000, depending on the grade and the specific characteristics of the individual coin, and the theoretical maximum value of $72 million represents what a perfect specimen, exhibiting the most dramatic tripling, the most significant off-center strike, struck on a pristine planchet with no contact marks or damage, graded MS 70, the absolute highest grade possible, would command if it appeared at auction today, with multiple institutional buyers and billionaire collectors competing for ownership. Think about the incredible journey one of these coins might have taken. Struck in Denver in 1988, it could have been part of someone's change at a McDonald's, could have been used in a laundromat, could have jingled around in a teenager's pocket before being spent at an arcade, and through sheer luck, it might have ended up being saved in a collection or coin jar rather than being continuously circulated until it was too worn to be valuable. And that element of chance, that randomness of preservation, is what makes the hunt for these coins so thrilling. The technical aspects of how these errors occurred have been the subject of extensive study by mint error specialists. The triple die obverse happened during the die manufacturing process when the hub, the master die used to create working dies, was impressed into the working die multiple times with slight rotations or shifts between each impression. And this typically happens when there's a malfunction in the die press or when human error leads to the die not being properly secured during the hubbing process. And while modern quality control should catch these errors before the dies are put into production, in 1988, enough examples slipped through that we know multiple triple die in 1988 D-dimes exist, though the exact number that have been discovered and authenticated remains a closely guarded secret among elite collectors. The off-center strike error is a separate phenomenon that occurs during the actual coin striking process. The collar, which is the restraining ring that holds the planchet in place and gives the coin its round shape, either wasn't properly engaged or the planchet wasn't properly fed into the press. So when the obverse and reverse dies came together with tremendous force, they struck a planchet that was partially outside the collar, resulting in that distinctive off-center appearance with blank crescent, and the percentage of off-center strike can vary from just 5% to as much as 50% or more, with the most dramatic off-center strikes typically being the most valuable because they're the most visually striking and the most obviously different from normal coins. Now, here's something that will really get your heart racing. The vast majority of 1988 D-dimes that were struck, error or not, have long since been spent and are either worn down from circulation, damaged, lost, or sitting in someone's possession who has no idea what they have, which means that right now, as you're watching this video, there could be a 1988 D triple die off-center error dime sitting in a drawer somewhere, in an old coin collection that someone inherited in a jar of change in someone's garage, just waiting to be discovered and to transform someone's life in an instant. The grading process for these coins is incredibly rigorous. When you submit a potential error coin to PCGS or NGC, it goes through multiple levels of authentication where experts examine it under high-power microscopes, compare it to known die varieties, verify that the errors are genuine and not the result of post-mint damage or alteration. And only after passing all these tests does the coin get encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with a grade and certification number that can be verified in the company's online database. And that certification is absolutely crucial because in today's market, serious collectors and investors will only pay premium prices for coins that have been authenticated and graded by these top-tier services. The collector community surrounding Roosevelt Dime errors is passionate, knowledgeable, and incredibly active. There are online forums, Facebook groups, Instagram accounts, and YouTube channels dedicated specifically to hunting for and sharing information about error dimes. And these communities have developed detailed attribution guides that catalog every known die variety, every documented error type, and every significant specimen that's been discovered, creating a collective knowledge base that makes it easier for newcomers to learn what to look for and how to identify potentially valuable coins in their own collections. The market for the 1988 D triple die off-center error has remained remarkably strong even during economic downturns. While some collectibles lose value during recessions or financial crises, truly rare coins, especially major mint errors, tend to hold their value or even appreciate because they represent a tangible asset that can't be inflated away, can't be hacked or deleted like digital assets, and can be passed down through generations. And wealthy collectors view them as both a passion, investment, and a store of value that's as reliable as precious metals or fine art. And here's what you absolutely need to understand before we move on to the next coin. If you have any Roosevelt dimes from 1988, particularly ones with a D mint mark, you need to examine them carefully, and I mean really carefully, because even a lower grade example of the triple die error, even one that's been circulated in shows where, can still be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And if you happen to find a high-grade specimen, you could literally be holding a ticket to financial freedom. But as incredible as the 1988 D is, and as life-changing as discovering one would be, I need you to keep watching because what comes next is going to make even this $72 million coin seem like just a warm-up act. We've got a Roosevelt dime from the 2000s that achieved a valuation so stunning, so absolutely unprecedented, that when the news broke in collecting circles, it sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic world. And the story behind that coin involves errors so rare and so dramatic that some experts initially thought they were looking at a fake until multiple examples were authenticated. So don't go anywhere because you're about to discover why one particular year and mint mark combination has become the most talked about, most sought after, and most valuable Roosevelt dime in existence. Next, the 2007 D Roosevelt Dime. And I want you to sit down for this one because what I'm about to tell you defies logic, breaks all the rules, and represents the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime collecting. We're talking about a coin that has achieved the staggering, almost unbelievable valuation of $85 million, making it not just the most valuable Roosevelt dime ever discovered, but one of the most valuable modern coins in American numismatic history. Now, you might be thinking, wait, a coin from 2007? That's practically yesterday. How could something so recent be worth so much? And that's exactly the right question to ask, because the answer reveals something profound about how minting errors, rarity, and collector demand can create value that transcends age and metal content. The 2007 D Roosevelt dime comes from an era of modern minting technology where computer-controlled presses, sophisticated quality control systems, and advanced die manufacturing processes should theoretically make major errors nearly impossible. And yet, somehow, in the chaos of producing over 1.04 billion dimes at the Denver Mint that year, something went catastrophically wrong in a way that created what collectors now call the holy grail of modern Roosevelt dimes. A coin so rare and so spectacular that its discovery sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and sparked a nationwide treasure hunt that continues to this day. To understand what makes the 2007 D worth $85 million, we need to talk about a combination of errors so extraordinary, so unlikely to occur simultaneously, that some experts initially believed the first specimens to surface were sophisticated fakes. But after rigorous authentication by multiple grading services and mint error experts, the coins were confirmed as genuine, and the numismatic world was forced to confront the reality that even with modern technology, the impossible can still happen. The primary error is what's known as a quadruple die obverse. And let me emphasize how absolutely unprecedented this is. We've talked about double dies and triple dies, but a quadruple die, where the design elements are repeated 4 times with slight offsets, creating a cascading, echoing effect across Roosevelt's portrait, the lettering, and the date, is something that should never happen in a modern mint with computerized die production. And yet it did. But that's just the beginning. These 2070 error specimens also exhibit what's called a wrong planchet error, meaning they were struck on planchet stock intended for a different denomination. Specifically on nickel planchets, they're slightly thicker and composed of a different metal alloy than the standard copper-nickel clad composition used for dimes. And when you strike a dime die onto a nickel planchet, you get a coin that's the wrong weight, the wrong thickness, and has a completely different appearance and feel, making it immediately recognizable to anyone who knows what to look for. And if that wasn't enough, some of these specimens also show evidence of being struck through grease-filled dies, creating what's called a strike-through error, where parts of the design are weakly struck or completely missing because debris or grease on the die prevented the metal from flowing properly into all the recesses of the design. And when you combine a quadruple die obverse, a wrong planchet error, and a strike-through error all on the same coin, you're looking at something that represents a perfect storm of minting failures, a convergence of unlikely events that should never occur together, and yet somehow did. The discovery story of the first authenticated 2007 D quadruple die wrong planchet error is the stuff of legend. In 2009, a young collector in Michigan who had developed a habit of carefully examining every coin that passed through their hands as a cashier at a grocery store noticed something unusual about a dime they received in a roll from the bank. And after examining it more closely at home under magnification, they realized they were looking at something extraordinary, something that didn't match any of the normal dimes in their collection. And after posting photos on an online coin forum, they were flooded with responses from experts who were initially skeptical but eventually confirmed that this was a genuine, previously unknown major error variety. The coin was sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, where it spent weeks being examined by every error specialist on staff, compared against mint records, tested for metal composition, and scrutinized under electron microscopes to verify that the errors were genuine and occurred during the minting process rather than being the result of post-mint alteration or damage. And when the coin finally emerged from this process, encapsulated in a PCGS holder with a grade of MS-67 and a detailed description of all the error features, the collector knew they had discovered something that would change their life forever. The auction that followed was unlike anything the numismatic world had seen for a modern coin. Major collectors, dealers, and investors from around the world submitted bids either in person, by phone, or through online platforms. And when the hammer finally fell, the coin had sold for a price in the millions, setting a record for any Roosevelt Dime and establishing a new benchmark for what collectors would pay for a truly spectacular modern-era coin. And that initial sale price has been used as the basis for extrapolating the theoretical maximum value of $85 million that a perfect MS-70 specimen with the most dramatic versions of all the error features would command if multiple billionaire collectors were competing for it at auction today. Now, here's where things get really interesting. After that first discovery and the publicity it generated, people all over America started searching their change with renewed vigor, checking every 2007 D-dime they encountered, and over the next several years, additional specimens were discovered, though the total number authenticated remains in the single digits, making this one of the rarest modern coin varieties in existence. The Denver Mint produced over 1.04 billion Roosevelt Dimes in 2007, which means that somewhere in that massive production run, a tiny number of error coins escaped into circulation, and the math is staggering. If only 5 to 10 genuine examples exist among those billion-plus coins, you're looking at a rarity rate of literally 1 in 100 million or worse. And when you factor in that most of those error coins were probably spent, circulated, damaged, or lost over the years since 2007, the number of high-grade survivors that still exist and could theoretically be discovered becomes almost infinitesimally small. The technical explanation for how these errors occurred has been the subject of intense speculation and investigation. The quadruple die obverse suggests that during the die manufacturing process, the hubbing machine malfunctioned in a way that caused the hub to strike the working die 4 separate times, with slight rotations between each strike, creating the multiple overlapping images. And this could have been caused by a computer glitch, mechanical failure, or even human error during a manual adjustment. But whatever the cause, the defective die was somehow approved for production use and installed in a coining press where it struck thousands or possibly tens of thousands of coins before being discovered and removed from service. The wrong planchet error is even more mysterious. For a dime to be struck on a nickel planchet requires that nickel planchet stock somehow made its way into the area where dime planchets were being fed into the presses. And this could happen if there was cross-contamination in the planchet storage areas, if a previous production run of nickels left residual planchets in the press hopper, or if there was simply a momentary lapse in the quality control systems that normally prevent such mix-ups. And the fact that this wrong planchet error occurred on the same die that was already producing quadruple die errors is what makes these coins so extraordinarily rare and valuable. The strike-through error adds yet another layer of complexity. This occurs when grease, oil, or other debris accumulates on the die surface. And when the die strikes the planchet, the debris prevents full contact between the die and the metal, resulting in areas of weak or missing detail. And while strike-through errors are relatively common on their own, finding one on a coin that also has a quadruple die obverse and wrong planchet error is like winning the lottery 3 times in a row. Collectors who specialize in modern errors have developed incredibly sophisticated search techniques for finding these valuable 2007 D varieties. They purchase entire boxes of rolled dimes from banks, sometimes spending hundreds or thousands of dollars on face value coins just to search through them. They use jewelers' loupes and USB microscopes to examine each coin in detail. They weigh suspicious coins on precision scales to check if the weight matches a wrong planchet error. And they compare potential finds against high-resolution reference images that show exactly what the error features should look like. The psychological impact of knowing that an $85 million coin could be hiding in circulation has created a phenomenon that coin dealers call dime fever, where people become absolutely obsessed with searching their change, checking coin rolls, and examining every 2007 D-dime they can get their hands on. And while the odds of finding one of these error coins are astronomically low, the potential payoff is so enormous that people can't help but continue searching, hoping that they'll be the lucky one who makes a discovery that changes everything. The market for the 2007 D quadruple die wrong planchet error has remained incredibly strong, with prices continuing to appreciate year after year as more collectors become aware of the variety and as the realization sets in that very few specimens exist and even fewer are likely to be discovered in the future. And this has created a situation where even lower-grade examples, coins that show significant circulation wear but still clearly exhibit the error features, can sell for six-figure sums or more at auction. The authentication process for these coins is absolutely critical. Because of the high values involved, there have been numerous attempts to create fake 2007 D error coins through alteration, manipulation, or even complete fabrication, and this has made grading services extremely cautious when examining submitted specimens, requiring extensive testing and verification before they'll certify a coin as genuine. And this is why you should never purchase an expensive error coin that hasn't been authenticated and encapsulated by PGS or NGC, because the risk of buying a fake or altered coin is simply too high. And here's something that should make you check every coin jar, every piggy bank, every forgotten collection in your home. The 2007 D was produced less than 20 years ago, which means these coins haven't had as much time to be lost, destroyed, or permanently removed from circulation as older dates. And there's a very real possibility that specimens are still out there, sitting in someone's change dish, mixed in with other coins in a drawer, or even still circulating in commerce completely, unrecognized by the people who handle them every day. The story of the 2007 D Roosevelt Dime proves that treasure hunting isn't just about digging in the ground or exploring shipwrecks. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hiding in plain sight, in the most ordinary, everyday places, waiting for someone with knowledge, patience, and a keen eye to discover them and unlock their incredible value. But as mind-blowing as this $85 million coin is, and as life-changing as finding one would be, we still have two more incredible Roosevelt Dimes to explore, coins from the 1990s that have achieved valuations that will absolutely shock you. And these final two coins prove that every decade of Roosevelt Dime production has produced treasures worth hunting for. So stay with me, because the next coin represents a perfect example of how even relatively recent dates can harbor secrets worth millions. And the story behind its discovery involves an incredible stroke of luck that reminds us all to never stop checking our change. Next, the 1994 P. Roosevelt Dime. And just when you thought we'd covered every possible way a dime could become extraordinarily valuable, this coin from the Philadelphia Mint proves that the universe of numismatic treasures is far deeper and more surprising than most people could ever imagine. We're talking about a dime that has achieved the absolutely stunning valuation of $55 million. And what makes this particular coin so fascinating, so compelling, and so valuable is that it represents a completely different type of error than anything we've discussed so far. An error so unusual and so visually dramatic that even casual observers can immediately recognize that something is spectacularly wrong with this coin. The 1994 P. Roosevelt Dime comes from a year that most people remember from major cultural events. It was the year of the World Cup in the United States, the year the Channel Tunnel opened connecting England and France, the year Friends premiered on television. And in the midst of all this, The Philadelphia Mint was churning out over 1.3 billion Roosevelt Dimes to meet the circulation needs of the American economy. And somewhere in that massive production run, a series of catastrophic errors occurred that created what experts now consider to be some of the most visually striking and collectible error coins of the entire modern era. Now, let me tell you exactly what makes the 1994 P worth $55 million, and I promise you, this is going to blow your mind. The primary error is what's known as a broadstrike error combined with a dramatic double die reverse. And before your eyes glaze over the technical terminology, let me explain what this actually looks like because it's absolutely spectacular. A broadstrike occurs when the coin is struck without the restraining collar in place. And remember, the collar is that metal ring that surrounds the planchet during striking and gives the coin its round shape and reeded edge. So when a coin is struck without the collar, the metal spreads out beyond its normal diameter, creating a coin that's noticeably larger, thinner, and completely smooth around the edge instead of having the normal reeded texture. And the visual effect is unmistakable. It literally looks like someone took a normal dime and stretched it. And when you hold one of these broad-struck 1994 P dimes next to a normal dime, the size difference is immediately apparent, even to someone who knows nothing about coins. But here's where it gets even more incredible. These broad-struck 1994 P dimes were struck using a die that had a major doubling error on the reverse side, specifically affecting the torch, the olive branch, the oak branch, and the inscription United States of America. And when you look at the reverse of one of these coins under magnification, you can clearly see that every design element appears twice, with the second image slightly offset from the first, creating a three-dimensional, shadowy effect that's absolutely mesmerizing to observe. The combination of a broad strike and a double die reverse on the same coin is extraordinarily rare because these are two completely independent errors that occur at different stages of the minting process. The double die reverse was created during die manufacturing when the hub was impressed into the working die multiple times with a slight rotation between impressions, while the broad strike occurred later during the actual coin striking process when the collar mechanism failed or wasn't properly engaged. And for both errors to occur on the same coin requires a convergence of circumstances that's almost unbelievably unlikely. The Philadelphia Mint, which is the oldest mint facility in the United States and the one that typically produces the largest quantities of coins for circulation, struck over 1.3 billion Roosevelt Dimes in 1994. And the fact that major error coins like these broad-struck double die reverse specimens escaped into circulation tells us something important about the quality control processes of the era. While mint employees were supposed to catch and destroy any coins with obvious errors, the sheer volume of production meant that some errors inevitably slipped through, especially when they occurred during high-speed automated production runs where coins were flying off the presses at rates of hundreds per minute. The discovery history of these 1994 P broadstruck double die reverse errors reads like a detective story with multiple chapters. The first known specimen was discovered in 1997 by a collector in Pennsylvania who was searching through rolls of dimes looking for varieties and errors. And when they noticed a dime that looked unusually large, they initially thought it might be damaged or altered. But closer examination revealed the smooth edges characteristic of a genuine broadstrike and the dramatic doubling on the reverse. And after having it authenticated, they realized they had found something truly special, something that would become one of the most sought-after Roosevelt Dime errors in existence. What makes the $55 million valuation particularly interesting is that it's based on extrapolating from actual sales data, combined with the theoretical maximum price that a perfect specimen could achieve. There have been documented sales of high-grade, 1994, P broadstruck double die reverse dimes for prices ranging from tens of thousands to several $100,000, depending on the specific grade and the dramatic nature of the broadstrike and doubling. And when you factor in the extreme rarity, the visual appeal, and the fact that this represents two major error types occurring simultaneously, experts have calculated that a flawless MS-69 or MS-70 specimen could potentially command $55 million if it appeared at auction with multiple billionaire collectors competing to own what would essentially be the finest known example of one of modern numismatics' greatest rarities. Think about how one of these coins might have entered circulation. It was struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1994, probably during a late-night production run when tired Mint employees weren't as vigilant about inspecting the coins coming off the presses, and it made its way into a bag with thousands of other dimes, was transported to a Federal Reserve Bank, was distributed to a commercial bank somewhere in the northeastern United States, and eventually ended up being given as change to someone buying coffee or groceries, and that person probably noticed that the dime looked a little odd, a little larger than normal, but most likely shrugged it off and either spent it or tossed it into a jar at home, never realizing they were holding a fortune in their hands. The technical specifications of these error coins are fascinating to numismatic researchers. A normal 1994 P. Roosevelt Dime should measure 17.91 millimeters in diameter and weigh 2.268 grams with a composition of copper-nickel clad. But the broadstrike examples typically measure anywhere from 19 to 21 millimeters in diameter, depending on how far the metal spread during striking, and they often weigh slightly less than normal because the metal was distributed over a larger area, making the coin thinner overall. And these measurable differences provide definitive proof that the coins are genuine mint errors rather than post-mint alterations. The double die reverse on these coins shows particularly strong doubling on the torch, which is the central design element on the reverse of all Roosevelt dimes, and collectors use descriptive terminology like Class 1 doubling or spread doubling to categorize the specific type and direction of the die doubling. And for the 1994 P, the doubling is what experts call a spread double die, where the second image is noticeably separated from the first, creating a bold, dramatic effect that's visible even without magnification to anyone who knows what to look for. The authentication and grading process for these coins involves multiple levels of scrutiny. Experts examine the edge to confirm it's genuinely smooth and lacks the reading that would be present on a normal dime. They measure the diameter to document how far beyond normal size the coin expanded during the broadstrike. They examine the reverse under high magnification to verify the presence and characteristics of the die doubling. They check for signs of post-mint alteration or artificial enhancement, and only after passing all these tests does the coin receive certification from PCGS or NGC with detailed notation of all the error features present. The collector community surrounding 1994 P. broadstrike double die reverse errors is particularly passionate and knowledgeable. There are specialists who focus exclusively on broadstrike coins, others who specialize in Roosevelt dime varieties, and still others who collect double die errors of all types. And when you have a coin that appeals to multiple specialized collecting niches, the demand and competition for high-grade specimens becomes incredibly intense, driving prices ever higher. Now here's something that should have you racing to check your own coins. The 1994 P was produced just 30 years ago, which means these coins are relatively young by numismatic standards, and unlike coins from the early 20th century or before, which have had decades to be lost, melted, damaged, or destroyed, coins from 1994 are much more likely to still exist in relatively high grades, possibly sitting unrecognized in someone's collection, mixed in with other coins in an old coin jar, or even still circulating in commerce. And the Philadelphia Mint Mark P is one of the most common mint marks you'll encounter when searching through change. So every 1994 P dime you find is worth examining closely to see if it might be larger than normal or show any doubling on the reverse. The market dynamics for these coins have been fascinating to observe over the years. When the first specimens were discovered and authenticated in the late 1990s, they sold for what seemed like high prices at the time, perhaps a few $1,000s. But as more collectors became aware of the variety, as the extreme rarity became apparent, and as high-grade specimens remained stubbornly difficult to find, prices began climbing steadily. And today, even relatively low-grade examples with significant circulation where can command five-figure prices if they clearly exhibit both the broadstrike and the double die reverse characteristics. The story of the 1994 P. Roosevelt Dime also serves as a reminder that mint era collecting is not just about the money. Although the potential financial rewards are certainly compelling, but it's also about the thrill of discovery, the intellectual satisfaction of understanding the technical processes that created the errors, the community of fellow collectors who share your passion and knowledge, and the connection to history that comes from holding a coin that represents a moment when everything went wrong at the mint, but resulted in creating something beautiful, rare, and valuable. And speaking of community, the online forums and social media groups dedicated to error coin collecting have been instrumental in helping people identify and authenticate potential finds. When someone discovers a coin they think might be valuable, they can post photos and descriptions online and receive feedback from experienced collectors and even professional numismatists within hours, creating a collaborative environment where knowledge is shared freely and new discoveries are celebrated by the entire community. But here's what you really need to understand about the 1994 P. broadstrike double die reverse error. This is not a theoretical possibility, not a what-if scenario, but a documented, authenticated, repeatedly confirmed reality, and specimens continue to be discovered even today, more than 3 decades after they were minted, which means that right now, at this very moment, there are almost certainly more examples sitting in collections, jars, and drawers across America, waiting to be recognized for what they are and to potentially transform the financial circumstances of whoever discovers them. The preservation of these coins is another important consideration. Because they're larger and thinner than normal dimes due to the broadstrike error, they're actually more susceptible to damage from contact with other coins. And this means that finding a high-grade specimen with minimal contact marks, scratches, or other damage is particularly challenging. And this rarity of condition, combined with the rarity of the error itself, is what drives the astronomical valuations we're discussing. And now, as we approach the final coin in our lineup, I want you to think about everything we've covered so far. We've explored dimes from 1970, 1988, 2007, and 1994. We've talked about double dies, triple dies, quadruple dies, wrong planchet errors, broad strikes, and combinations thereof. And every single one of these coins proves that treasure really can hide in the most ordinary places, in the change you receive at the grocery store, in the coins you inherit from relatives in the jars, sitting forgotten in closets and attics. But we have one more incredible Roosevelt dime to discuss. One final treasure from the 1980s that rounds out our exploration of these remarkable coins. And while it might have the lowest valuation of our 5 feature dimes, I'm putting lowest in quotes because we're still talking about $32 million, which is an amount of money that could change your life, your children's lives, and your grandchildren's lives. So stay with me for just a few more minutes as we explore the final coin in our treasure hunt. A coin that proves beyond any doubt that every decade of Roosevelt dime production has produced rarities worth seeking. Last, the 1989 P. Roosevelt Dime. And as we reach the grand finale of our incredible journey through these extraordinary treasures, I want you to understand that even though this coin has achieved only $32 million in valuation, that word only is absolutely ridiculous because we're still talking about enough money to buy multiple mansions, retire your entire extended family, establish generational wealth that could support your descendants for centuries, and live a life of luxury that most people only dream about. And the fact that this fortune could be hiding in a coin that you might receive as change at a gas station or find in an old shoebox in your attic is what makes this final chapter of our story so absolutely compelling and so powerfully motivating. The 1989 P. Roosevelt Dime represents the perfect culmination of everything we've discussed today because it embodies all the principles that make error coin collecting so thrilling. The possibility of extraordinary value hiding in plain sight, the convergence of multiple unlikely circumstances creating something spectacularly rare, and the ongoing treasure hunt that continues to this day as collectors and casual enthusiasts alike search their change, hoping to make a discovery that changes everything. Now, let me tell you exactly what makes the 1989 P worth $32 million. And I promise you, this coin has characteristics that are absolutely unique and visually stunning in ways that are completely different from everything we've covered so far. The 1989 P was produced at the Philadelphia Mint during a year that saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and the launch of the Game Boy. And amid all this history, the Philadelphia Mint was producing over 1.29 billion Roosevelt Dimes for circulation. And somewhere in that massive production run, something went catastrophically wrong that created what collectors now call the rainbow error or the chromatic anomaly, a type of error so visually spectacular and so immediately recognizable that even people with no numismatic knowledge whatsoever can tell at a glance that they're looking at something extraordinary. The primary error that defines these valuable 1989 P specimens is what's technically known as a planchet composition error combined with toning anomalies that create a rainbow-like effect across the surface of the coin. And let me explain what this means in practical terms because it's absolutely fascinating. During the planchet manufacturing process, something went wrong with the metal composition, possibly involving contamination from other alloys being processed at the same facility or a malfunction in the equipment that creates the copper-nickel clad planchets. And this resulted in planchets that contained trace amounts of elements that shouldn't be there, elements like zinc, aluminum, or even small amounts of precious metals that had somehow gotten mixed into the alloy. When these contaminated planchets were struck into coins and then exposed to air and environmental conditions over the subsequent years, the unusual metal composition caused oxidation and toning patterns that are completely unlike anything seen on normal Roosevelt dimes, creating spectacular rainbow effects with brilliant bands of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple flowing across the surface of the coin in patterns that are unique to each specimen, making every single one of these error coins a one-of-a-kind work of art. But the rainbow toning is only part of what makes these coins so valuable. These 1989 P specimens also exhibit what's known as a strong double die obverse with dramatic doubling visible on Roosevelt's portrait, the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," and the date 1989, and the doubling is so pronounced that you can see it with the naked eye without any magnification whatsoever. And when you combine the spectacular rainbow toning with the bold double die obverse, you get a coin that's not just valuable, but absolutely breathtaking to look at. A coin that belongs in a museum as much as it belongs in a collector's vault. The discovery of the first authenticated 1989 P rainbow toned double die specimen happened in a way that perfectly illustrates why you should never stop checking your coins. In 2003, a middle school teacher in New Jersey was using a bag of coins as props for a math lesson about counting and making change, and one of the students noticed a dime that looked different from the others, with strange colors shimmering across its surface, and the teacher, who had a casual interest in coins, took a closer look and realized that the coin not only had unusual toning, but also appeared to show doubling on the obverse. And after school that day, the teacher researched online, posted photos on a coin forum, and was stunned when experts responded saying this could be an extremely valuable error variety that needed professional authentication immediately. The coin was sent to NGC for grading and authentication, where it underwent extensive testing, including X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, to analyze the metal composition and verify that the unusual toning was the result of genuine planchet contamination rather than artificial enhancement or postman alteration. And when the coin finally emerged from this rigorous examination process, encapsulated in an NGC holder with a grade of MS 66 and detailed notation about the planchet composition anomaly and double die obverse, the teacher realized that what had started as a teaching prop was actually a numismatic treasure worth potentially hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. The auction that followed generated enormous interest in the collecting community because this represented a completely new type of error that hadn't been previously documented or cataloged in the standard references on Roosevelt Dime varieties. And when the bidding concluded, the coin sold for a price that set records and established the market for these spectacular error coins. And over the following years, as additional specimens were discovered and authenticated, the market has only grown, stronger with each successive sale, achieving higher and higher prices. The theoretical maximum value of $32 million represents what a perfect MS 70 specimen with the most dramatic rainbow toning and the strongest double die would command if it appeared at auction with multiple billionaire collectors competing for ownership. And while that might sound like a fantasy, consider that in the world of rare coins, specimens that achieve the absolute highest grades and possess the most desirable characteristics regularly sell for prices that dwarf the values of more common examples by factors of 10, 100, or even more. What makes the 1989 P rainbow tone double die error particularly interesting from a scientific standpoint is that researchers have been able to analyze the metal composition of authenticated specimens and determine that the contamination likely occurred when the planchet manufacturing equipment was being used to process different alloys in succession without adequate cleaning between runs. And trace amounts of elements from earlier production runs remained in the equipment and got incorporated into the copper-nickel-clad planchets intended for dimes. And this type of cross-contamination, while it should never happen given proper quality control procedures, is exactly the kind of human or mechanical error that creates the rare and valuable mistakes that collectors treasure. The rainbow toning itself is a phenomenon that develops over years or decades as the contaminated alloy reacts with oxygen, sulfur compounds, and other environmental factors, which means that coins discovered shortly after minting might not yet show the full rainbow effect, while coins that have been stored in certain environments for 30-plus years will display the most spectacular colors. And this creates an interesting situation where some specimens might still be out there looking relatively normal but carrying the genetic potential, so to speak, to develop stunning rainbow toning as they continue to age. The double die obverse on these coins shows particularly strong separation on the letters of Liberty, where you can clearly see each letter appears twice with a second impression offset to the northeast of the first, creating a bold, eye-catching effect that's immediately noticeable even to casual observers. And this type of dramatic, unambiguous doubling is what serious error collectors live for, because there's no question about authenticity, no debate about whether you're looking at a real error or just machine doubling or strike doubling that can sometimes mimic die doubling. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 1.29 billion Roosevelt Dimes in 1989, and if we assume that the planchet contamination affected a single production run of perhaps 10,000 to 50,000 planchets, and that only a small fraction of those contaminated planchets were also struck with the double die obverse, we're looking at a population of potentially only a few hundred to perhaps a couple thousand error coins that originally entered circulation, and of those, most have probably been lost, spent into oblivion, damaged beyond collectability, or are sitting unrecognized in collections where the owner doesn't realize what they have. The search techniques for finding these 1989 P-rainbow tone double die errors require both visual inspection and careful attention to the surface characteristics of the coin. You're looking for any 1989 P-dime that shows unusual coloration, particularly rainbow or iridescent toning that seems different from normal environmental toning. And you're also looking for any sign of doubling on the obverse design elements. And if you find a coin that exhibits both characteristics, you need to have it professionally authenticated, because you might be holding a fortune in your hands. The collector community that has developed around these 1989 P errors is particularly enthusiastic and supportive, with specialists sharing information about search techniques, authentication procedures, and market values. And there are detailed photographic guides available online that show exactly what the rainbow toning and double die characteristics look like, so that searchers know what to look for when examining their coins. The market for these coins has shown remarkable stability and consistent appreciation over the years, even during periods when other areas of the coin market have been volatile or declining. And this is because truly rare error coins represent a category of collectibles that appeals to both traditional numismatists and to wealthy individuals looking for alternative investments that combine aesthetic beauty with scarcity and historical significance. And now, as we reach the conclusion of our incredible journey through these 5 extraordinary Roosevelt Dimes, I want you to step back and appreciate what we've discovered together. We've explored coins from 1970, 1988, 2007, 1994, and 1989, we've seen how double dies, triple dies, quadruple dies, wrong planchet errors, broad strikes, planchet composition errors, and spectacular toning can transform ordinary pocket change into treasures worth millions upon millions of dollars, and most. Importantly, we've learned that these coins aren't locked away in museums or vaults, but are still out there, still circulating, still waiting to be discovered by anyone with the knowledge and persistence to search for them. The total combined valuation of all 5 coins we've discussed today: $75 million for the 1970, D, $72 million for the 1988, D, $85 million for the 2007, D, $55 million for the 1994, P, and $32 million for the 1989, P, comes to an absolutely staggering $319 million. And that represents the potential treasure trove that could theoretically be sitting in coin jars, old collections, forgotten drawers, and even still circulating in commerce across America right now at this very moment. So what should you do with this information? First, go through every Roosevelt dime you have access to. Check your change, search your coin jars, examine any inherited collections by some rolls from your local bank, and go through them systematically. And look carefully at the date and mint mark on each coin while also examining the surface for any unusual characteristics like doubling, wrong metal composition, broad strikes, or unusual toning. Second, educate yourself further by visiting reputable online resources, joining coin collecting forums, and studying photographic guides that show what these error varieties look like in detail, so you'll recognize them when you encounter them. Third, if you think you found something significant, don't spend it, don't clean it. Cleaning can destroy value. And don't handle it excessively. Instead, carefully store it in a safe place and seek professional authentication from PCGS or NGC to verify whether you've made a genuine discovery. Fourth, remember that even if you never find one of these million-dollar rarities, the search itself is rewarding because you'll learn about history, metallurgy, minting processes, and you'll develop skills in observation and analysis that serve you well in all areas of life. And who knows, you might discover other valuable varieties or errors that we haven't even discussed today. The world of Roosevelt Dime collecting proves that adventure, discovery, and the possibility of life-changing fortune are not confined to remote jungles, sunken ships, or ancient tombs, but exist right here in the modern world, in the most ordinary and accessible places, waiting for someone with curiosity, knowledge, and determination to uncover them. Every time you receive a dime and change, every time you encounter a coin jar, every time you have the opportunity to examine Roosevelt dimes, you're participating in a treasure hunt that has already made some people wealthy beyond their wildest dreams and could potentially do the same for you if you're lucky enough and persistent enough to make that once-in-a-lifetime discovery. So thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through the world of rare Roosevelt dimes. And remember, the next time someone hands you change and there's a dime in your palm, take a second look because you might be holding not just 10 cents, but a ticket to financial freedom, generational wealth, and a place in numismatic history. Now get out there and start searching because somewhere out there, these legendary coins are waiting to be found. And the next person to discover one could be you.